Hey everyone, we're at Computex 2018, and this is a recap video of the worst in show. Two things apply here: the worst products and the most offensive waste of our time.
Hey dude, so I have a great concept for you. I'm so glad I ran into you. Have you seen the vacuum booth?
The vacuum booth?
Yeah, and also actually, do you mind if we sit down for maybe like half an hour or so? I want to run through some concepts I have for how you guys can improve your channel.
Really?
Yeah, so...
Does it involve float plane?
No, it doesn't. No, you know what? We should book an hour. So I want to go through float plane. I want to tell you all about LTX, our convention, okay?
Then, wait. What about the vacuum booth?
I've got a new concept for your thumbnails, okay? So every thumbnail gets a vacuum, and you got to make a face like this. Try it. No, not extreme enough. You could be like, good, yeah, okay.
All right, so lessons. How much for lessons for thumbnails?
Lessons for thumbnails. Oh.
I hear you charge a lot.
Oh yeah, it's got to be at least, you know, let's
like
see.
six NVIDIA GPUs?
No, you can pay. Oh! Worst burn of the show.
Before that, this video is brought to you by the CableMod Vertical GPU Adapter, a universal kit that lets you add a vertical GPU mount to almost any enclosure. The vertical GPU adapter positions video cards further back from the glass than most stock vertical GPU mounts, aiding in thermals, and also easily sockets into the PCIe expansion slots of compatible cases. The adapter kit is brand new and makes it easy to show off video cards even in cases that don't include a stock vertical GPU mount. Learn more at the link in the description below. We're calling this video the Most Room for Improvement at Computex 2018 video. A lot of products this year are still prototypes, and so still have lots of time to improve things and change. Many of the manufacturers have asked for feedback from media and will be making changes prior to launch, hopefully, but we wanted to share some of our own hopes for improvement with all of you. ASUS is up first. ASUS is a big enough company that it seems to think it can do just about anything and be instantly successful. There may be some truth to that in some markets, but cases are not particularly forgiving to newcomers to the market. ASUS announced it's still pending ROG Strix case, TUF case, and a mini ITX case, presently unnamed, with the ITX case being the most interesting, but also the most problematic of design. Fortunately, ASUS's team was extremely receptive to feedback, and we greatly appreciate their desire to make a good product at the end of the day. There's still time for changes. Let's go over what needs to change. First off, for the ITX case, the case separates halfway down, which ASUS says is supposed to happen when the system has a thermal requirement to cool down. It's a mechanical part that separates it physically, so this is sort of like some of the in-wind cases in the past, but it's partly supposed to be a thermal solution feature. The problem is that the bottom and top parts are completely compartmentalized, so opening and closing doesn't actually expose ventilation. The top and bottom chambers are 100% sealed against one another, and when open, they remain sealed. It does not open any ventilation, and therefore cannot physically improve cooling. Separately, the bottom chamber is isolated for the power supply, which presently houses two 120mm intake fans. Upon touching the aluminum side panel, we found it to be warm, which doesn't make a ton of sense for an intake vent, and so we inspected further. We noticed that there were no exhaust fans or even exhaust mesh grills or anything for this bottom chamber. The air was being taken in from the sides and forced to escape out the bottom. The inherent flaw is that cool air goes in, warm air comes out the bottom, next to the fan, and then it immediately gets sucked back in, warmed even further, and recirculated ad infinitum. This creates a runaway thermal effect, which ASUS acknowledged and intends to improve. It's funny, but this is why prototypes come to the show, and hopefully they have enough time to fix it. The box also has no intake ventilation for the GPU. We've provided feedback that the aluminum support beams at the corners could use a grill, for example, or that the top and bottom of the compartments should be ventilated. Presently, there's no real intake in the box. We thought that the design was very interesting, but it does need a lot of work. ASUS has some good ideas here, though. Finally, for ASUS, the company also has an ROG Strix case and a TUF gaming case, both of which have a few critical areas of improvement. ASUS is working with larger case companies to manufacture these, like InWin, but is putting in the design first and working with the companies to finalize it. For the ROG Strix case, we noticed that the fans are far from the front of the case, which will reduce their efficacy and pressure where it counts most. We also noticed that the glass plate is less than a ½ inch away from the fans, and that the mesh filter is comprised of at least 50% plastic, which will further hurt airflow. The move to include handles and market for portability and LAN gaming also feels disconnected from this decade, particularly given that the case itself is a full ATX enclosure that's more suitable for micro ATX and does seem a bit of out of place for a heavy case like this one. ASUS has some good ideas here, but a lot of work is needed yet. It has to do more than have an ASUS badge to be desirable. We do like that ASUS was extremely receptive to feedback, but let's move on to another company. Next up, Acer. Acer's booth is next on our list of most improvable. The Acer booth was about 80% empty, populated by a few screens, a table, a computer, and presumably a staff member somewhere. We're not really sure what Acer was doing, but they sure seem to have spent a lot of money on a space that was woefully unused. In the very least, they successfully got tech media talking about them behind the scenes. Next up, Bitfenix. We met with Bitfenix again this year following the Enso's launch last year. Bitfenix expressed genuine interest in improving their product and introduced us to the CEO, who took note on avenues of improving their cases. We greatly respect this desire to improve the product, but it still has a long way to go yet for the new Fusion. Bitfenix's Fusion case does some odd things. It's got a mesh front, so it's going kind of in the right direction, but they also stuck a plastic cover behind the mesh. Truthfully, we sort of laughed when we first saw it. We were confused as to the intentions, and when we asked Bitfenix why the blocked mesh was covered with plastic, they said that the intent was to block RGB LED illumination from the fans on the front that Bitfenix opted to include. There's some cognitive dissonance here, but basically, Bitfenix wants RGB LED fans in the case, wants mesh, but also wants to insert a plastic sheet to block both of them because they're worried that users won't like the LEDs that they've elected to include. Our argument is that users who don't like the LEDs will either buy another case or will buy different fans and replace them, and that it makes more sense to target one market well rather than two markets poorly. The design is actually fine overall. If Bitfenix commits to full mesh or even full RGB LED, they'll do just fine. The company just needs to commit to one design. The price target is $80 with 2 to 3 fans, which would be extremely competitive. It's just that the front panel needs some work. They're most of the way to an acceptable mid-range product, and Bitfenix still has time to fix up that panel. Thermaltake is up next, mostly case companies this time. Thermaltake has some good initiatives with the Level 20 series. We think it's a good way to bring an expensive line down to consumer market, and it's basically the perfect implementation of a Halo product. They're doing it right on that front. Thermaltake also did well to add rotatable PCIe expansion brackets, allowing vertical GPUs to sit further back, something that Cooler Master added this year as well. But we still think the company has room to improve its cases. The glass, for example, should be cut back as much as possible on the sides or even the top, and potentially further distanced from the side panels of the case. This would allow for better airflow. An extra few millimeters of distance from the corner plates, for example, would aid significantly in this department as well. Thermaltake also has room to improve the left and right side panels, which are presently asymmetrical and don't match one another, although both are made of tempered glass. We do like the modularity of the micro ATX case, and the price point is extremely competitive at $100, but the ATX case could use a bit more tuning. Thermaltake is also on the list of vendors that have been receptive to feedback, and we've seen the company iterate its design in big ways as it works toward building a stronger reputation. SilverStone is next up. SilverStone has struggled to make changes in the new industry of glass and lights. The company has always focused on function and build quality, but suddenly has gotten caught up in trying to compete in the looks department. Although SilverStone had several cases that looked well designed and well made for the show, we found the new LD03 ITX mini tower to be the most perplexing. It's a good look, but detours far from Silverstone's core design philosophies of function. The case has no direct GPU intake or ventilation, evidenced by the usage of a liquid-cooled card on a show build, and relies on bottom intake that's largely blocked off by the side panels. We'd like to see Silverstone introduce some of their core design philosophies back into this case, like spacing it further from the floor or adding in more grills in the plastic. Ideally, the company also nudges the fan over to give the GPU more direct intake cooling paths. Intel is last on the list. Intel's 28-core CPU shouldn't have been shown in the state that it was at all. The CPU is impressive enough on its own that it will definitely turn heads once it's ready, but it simply wasn't. This was a rushed attempt to distract from Threadripper. We think that the 28 core part will be a fun enthusiast part from an enthusiast standpoint, and we look forward to it, but it simply was not ready to be shown. Intel hasn't had to compete with anyone for a long time, and we think that the company's most improvable attribute, sticking with the theme of the video, is that of relearning how to compete with a legitimate contender. AMD had some of the same problems recently, where it comes down to a matter of allowing the product to speak for itself rather than trying to build a marketing story around it, because people will see through it. That's it for our most improvable products at Computex 2018 list. As always, a link in the description below for more information. Go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly, store.gamersnexus.net to pick up one of our anti-static mod mats or one of the GN crystals that you'll be seeing in our awards show this week. Subscribe for more. I'll see you all next time.
All right, was that enough of a waste of your time?
Sure.
Fantastic.